he would always scream, know your position, know your position, know your role. He would say that nonstop. And so I think that's the same thing I'm trying to learn in marriage and in parenting. What is my role right now? Where am I supposed to be investing my time in my marriage? What is my role as a provider, as a defender? What is my role as a father while my daughter is 16 months old? Making sure that I stay in that lane and not try to do everything, because if I do everything, then I'm not covering the most important things. I'm not covering the things that I'm supposed to be doing.
Welcome to the How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast, where we explore leadership principles through the lens of the beautiful game.
Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. I'm Phil Dark, your host. With me, my brother, my co-host, Paul Jobson. Paul, how you doing, man, with that new background in some incredible location somewhere in this beautiful world?
It definitely makes me want to be in Guatemala. That's for sure. But
Yes.
basically, I logged on. I went to blur my screen, saw the background. I'm like, that's perfect. So I think the world that listens to us without us knowing they're listening knew this was going to be a soccer podcast today on the Zoom call. So it gave me the background that I needed. So
Yes.
Don't even ask, and it gives you what you need. So, but yeah, I love the photo. It makes me want to get out to Guatemala. Obviously we're building up for that trip, right? We've got a group of 30 going. This summer.
Good
So we're
segue, bro.
excited.
That was good. You've been doing this for a while.
We've been doing this a little bit. I think this is episode number like 5,000 or something, isn't it?
Something like that. Something like that.
Yeah, but no, man, winding down the end of the year, ramping up some cool stuff that we're looking forward to through the summer and into next year. I mean, you know how it is with the kids. Even last night, the kids are like, I want to do this camp, I want to do that camp, and it's like, oh my gosh, like can't do 5 camps in the same week, So navigating all that, but things are great here. In Waco, weather update, it's been a little bit stormy, rainy. I know people want to know what the weather is in Waco.
Of course.
So I want to address that. But anyway, man, things are good. What about you? What's going on with you? You're remote today. You're not from the home office.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah. I mean, the blurred screen, you didn't know, except it's not the white walls that we typically have behind me lately. I don't have that isn't Waco, folks. If you're watching on YouTube, that isn't Waco behind Paul, or maybe it is. We don't know. It could be. I doubt it.
Part of Waco.
It could be a part of Waco, certain parts of Waco. But and if you aren't watching, it is a beautiful pitch behind him that actually is grass, which you don't see very much of anymore in California anyway. So so I will say this is going to get a little deeper than normal in the intro.
Oh.
Yesterday, I get down to SoCal to pick up my son, and I got a text from one of my best friends, one of my groomsmen, sister in the morning, and he was on life support yesterday.
Wow.
And so I spent the day at the hospital. He didn't make it. And 50 years old. And the reason I
Wow.
bring it up is not is for no other reason except we talk about vulnerability a lot on this show, and it was just he didn't let people in for a long, long time. He didn't commit suicide. It wasn't a suicide. It was just long neglect and not letting people in. And so many people love him, and so many people wanted to help. And he'd give, it's one of those classic stories, give the shirt off his back, give anything to anyone, but never wanted to put anyone out for anything. And people like out there listening, and us, right, as well.
Yeah.
Like don't be afraid to ask, for help. Let people in, be vulnerable with people. We don't just use it as a buzzword and whatever. It's real. And people want to love you, and open yourself to be loved, and that sometimes means doing hard things, and sometimes means doing things you don't want to do. It sometimes means a lot of things, but there's a lot of people hurting right now because he's no longer with us, and it sucks, man. It sucks. And yet it's a natural consequence of not letting people in and just trying to do everything on your own and coming to the end of yourself and just being like, what's the point? So, and so anyway, all that to say, it was a tough day. It was a tough day.
Yeah.
With his family, who, like my second family growing up, or one of my second families anyway. And he didn't have a a brother, blood brother. So really probably the closest thing to a brother he's had. So it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
And I just pray. I pray. He has told me, he made point to tell me a couple conversations that we had recently. Hey, I know God. I know the Lord. I know the Lord,
Yeah.
and it's different from you, but I know the Lord. And so I'm praying. He's dancing with Jesus now, and
Amen.
he's not in pain anymore. He had neuropathy. He couldn't really walk. He couldn't do a lot of
Mm.
things that he was in pain all the time. And so I just pray he's not in pain now. He's
Yeah.
like I said, dancing with Jesus, having the joy that he brought to so many during his life. And so anyway, that's like I said, a little heavier thing, but it very much applies to what we talk about on the show.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just remember Wells talking about vulnerability and talking about some things. You see the massive rise in suicide, and so much of it's just not letting people in. So much of it's about just not being vulnerable and opening yourself up and love and being loved.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot
Yeah.
more stuff going on, but
Yeah.
that's obviously front of mind. Was not what I expected. There were several other things that were on my mind. Like I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I got that text and it was boom,
Yeah.
everything, your perspective check, right? And so I think, again, you hear this, and then oftentimes you do nothing but reach out to those who you love, and and today, right now, like if there's
Yeah.
somebody who who's hurting or you think they're hurting, reach out, go visit them. Don't accept, oh, I'm fine, when they're not.
Yeah.
And you don't want to see them in a bed on with the life support, and the other part of what was my two right around the corner, 2 rooms away is where my mom passed away. So it was
Mhm.
and the nurse worked with my mom, who was with my
Mm.
friend, and so
Yeah.
it was kind of cool in that. I was like, hey, do you know Barbara Dark? She
Wow.
looks at me like, yeah, I mean, because my mom passed 4 years ago. She goes, yeah. And I said, that's my mom. And she says, oh, she's
Wow.
OG. She's OG.
Oh, gee.
And I was like, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's
Yeah.
like, she's legend here, And so that was it was neat to see that someone who knew my mom was caring for one of his, she was basically a second mom to him. So anyway, yeah. So that was a
Well,
little,
well,
little
again, yeah,
different.
I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, like you said, it's important that we talk about these things and be vulnerable. And I think it's going to hit, hopefully the right person who needs to hear that. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, today we have one of my other brothers, a newer brother.
A
He
son.
actually could be my son, as he reminds me very often. Technically, he could be Paul's son as well.
What?
But not actually. I don't think we need any paternity tests today. Don't get too concerned, Marcy. If you're not,
Yeah.
we know you're not listening. So let's be honest. But we have Roman Khripunov. Yeah, I just love been able to get to know you over the last few years, and just your heart for ministry, your heart for the Lord, your heart for soccer, and just loving to see how in as you'll learn, folks out there, he is young. Some of you listening are younger, but I don't know. That's not very popular. That's a lot of people. I mean, out there. So, but Roman, working with the global sports movement, North American sports movement for many years, over half his life. And so anyway, Roman, tell the audience, not everyone knows you like I get to know you.
Yeah.
Not everyone has spent time in Honduras in a very kind of awkward, strange trip that we were able to do together to get to know each other. Folks, don't worry, it wasn't that awkward, but it was some funny moments. But anyway, tell everyone, briefly share your story. Kind of your family's journey to the U.S., passion for soccer, leadership, ministry, how all that came to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So I grew up in a country called Uzbekistan, not Pakistan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, just north of Afghanistan. That's where I grew up. That's where I lived majority of my childhood. Really loved it there. And it's a beautiful place. If you want to visit it, I highly encourage you. Just the city, Tashkent, where I grew up. celebrated 2,500 years since its founding. So it's extremely old. A lot of amazing, beautiful historical places. But I grew up in a family that loved sports. My dad played sports, soccer specifically, his whole life. He was a great striker, played for the U17 national team of Uzbekistan. But due to corruption in the post Soviet Union era, he was dropped really quickly for someone else. But grew up loving soccer. That was the only sport that we've played on the streets in Uzbekistan. Like, we don't have beautiful fields like you see here with Paul. We have mud fields, and instead of goals, we usually just have trees. And so each goal is a little different size. So grew up playing soccer, loving soccer. Grew up in a family that also believes sport is an incredible tool to share the gospel, to be united with people, to make disciples, to plant churches. And so as I was growing up, my family was involved in sports ministry in Uzbekistan, planted churches among Muslim background people in Uzbekistan. And at the same time, Uzbekistan was becoming highly persecuted, highly anti-Christian with the government specifically. And so growing up, seventh most persecuted country in the world, I thought Christians around the whole world lived in the same environment. I thought that once you commit to being Christian anywhere in the world, you lose your job, you lose your friends, you lose your family. In Uzbekistan specifically, you only as a family could have one Christian resource. And so if you had a Bible, you cannot have a Christian music CD or a t-shirt. You can only have a Bible and share it as a family. And if you were found out, you were punished severely, up to 5 years in prison. Some of our friends have spent. And so I thought, again, that's how Christians lived everywhere. And so my family, from the age of like 6, 7, I watched with my family World War II Holocaust movies because parents would tell us, look, throughout history, there were people who lived through suffering, through hardship, but they survived. And you will live through suffering and hardship, and likely you will lose us one day. It might be soon, it might be later on, but you will always have your Father in heaven. Lived, in a place where if my dad is not home by 10, we're questioning if he's ever going to be home because he's been in jail over 7 times. Our house, church being raided by the police pretty constantly. We had to develop a secret language. All the churches were underground. And so instead of Bible study, we used coloring books and different things like that. And so finally, the Uzbek government, because my mom moved from Kazakhstan when Soviet Union was falling apart to Uzbekistan, she had no citizenship. And so in 2006, Uzbek government gave us 48 hours. They deported us. They declared us spiritual terrorists as a family. And so they gave us 48 hours to pack all our bags, to say goodbye to everybody. And to move. And the crazy part is, Uzbekistan, the way they deport you, they just take you over the border. So they'll just drop you off over the border. And if the other country wants you, they accept you. If not, you kind of just live in this kind of nobody's land, trying to figure out where to go. But we were blessed because my grandparents were moved to the US in the 90s as refugees, spiritual refugees after the fall of Soviet Union. And so they got us tickets. And we moved to Moscow. So 48 hours later, police came over, handcuffed all of us, took us onto the plane. It was the fastest, TSA checked line that I ever went through. It was just like straight through, cut all the lines. They put us on the plane, asked my dad to pay for their gas. And we were on our way to Russia, lived in Russia for 8 months. And we really wanted to stay in that part of the world, Central Asia, Eastern Europe. But all countries rejected us. Nobody wanted us. And so we applied with United Nations, with their refugee immigrant services, asylum seeking services, to find a place for us. And that was a tough period of time because the day before we got kicked out, my mom found out she was pregnant, and we were waiting for 10 years to be pregnant. And finally she's pregnant, great news. And then we get the news that we're getting kicked out the next day. But I saw my parents just, they were young. My dad was in his early 30s. My mom was 29, 30 years old, so around my age. But I saw their faith not waver. They never sat there and cried and be like, why does it have to happen to us? Why, Lord? Why, Lord? It was, what's next for us, God? And it was just this posture of trust from them and posture of faith that really impacted me every day for those 8 months that we lived in Russia. we worshiped and prayed together as a family. And we've experienced, Moscow is an interesting place. It's not just nationalism that you experience in Russia. It's like cityism. Moscow specifically, people think that they're the highest, like, rank of society. And so even though we speak Russian fluently, but we have a dialect, Uzbek dialect, uh, we got bullied in school. There was a lot of racism that my brother and myself experienced. So it's very tough. And finally, Russia said, "Hey, we have great relationship with Uzbekistan. Um, we're going to have to deport you as well. So you have till April to leave this country." So the U.S. actually first rejected us. They didn't want us to move because in the 90s, when my grandparents moved to the U.S., my mom and dad decided to stay in Uzbekistan to continue to do ministry. And so US basically said, "You've proven your disloyalty to this nation already, so we don't want you here." And so we were like, all right, I guess we're going to move in the middle of, I don't know, Africa or somewhere, maybe where this picture is, Guatemala, somebody will want us. And it was really tough. And so about 6 days before we were getting deported from from Russia, the US government called us, specifically John McCain's office, who was really passionate about the persecuted church. And they said we can move to the US. And I thought we were moving to California, kind of where Phil lives, Sacramento area, because that's where all the Russians live, all the Ukrainians, everybody lives out there. That's where my family lives. But my dad and mom said, we're moving to Houston. And I had no clue what Houston was. I thought it's just desert, cowboys, like Western movies still happening out here. And I was shocked when we moved here. We were so blessed because we got adopted by families, by churches that really took care of us, really loved on us. But for my brother and I, our only dream was we going to play soccer finally, like on grass fields. We're going to wear nice cleats. We're going to have a nice soccer ball that is not ripped up. We're going to have high level coaching. We were so excited. That's all we dreamt about, living in Uzbekistan, not experiencing that, moving to the US. We thought this is going to be our life. Went to our first tryout and made the teams, both of us. And then a couple of days later, they sent us a bill. And my dad said, "You're not playing soccer because we can't afford it." And that crushed us. I mean, that was so hard to hear because that's all we wanted. That's all like we were thinking about. And all of a sudden we make the teams. We're excited. We have this great experience. My parents spent some of their last money buying us cleats and shin guards and some soccer jerseys so we can go and try out. And now we can't play.
Can you
And that
pause
was
for a sec, Roman?
yeah.
How old were you?
I was 12.
And so your
years
brother
old.
was 10?
10.
Yeah.
And
So
so
you're 12 and 10 going through all that in Uzbekistan, Moscow, like cruising throughout Eastern Europe, places that people in the US that are listening are probably like, why would anyone want to go there? And you're like, we want to spend the rest of our life in Moscow, but
they don't
now-
want us.
because you didn't speak the language either. That's a little thing you
Yeah.
left out.
Yeah.
like
When we moved here, we didn't speak a single word in English. Actually, we went to school the next day. And because we were adopted by churches in the north side of Houston, we moved to a city called the Woodlands, which is a really good city. Mostly, English speaking white folk live in the Woodlands. And so when we joined the school, the teachers had no clue what to do with us. They were just kind of like, "You don't speak English. How do we teach you?" And they just told us go play video games on the computer in the back. And so for like the first semester, that's all I did was just playing games on the computer. And I always tell people that the reason I learned English was Disney Channel. Hannah Montana, taught me English because my teachers didn't know what to do with me. So it was a fun experience. Yeah, we didn't know how to use the banks or like how to use a credit card, debit card, none of that. So that was a lot of learning. And in the Woodlands, we didn't think Houston was that diverse because the people around us were just American. We didn't see much diversity. And so kind of a moment happened in our lives when we went to a local beach called Galveston. And we just started playing soccer. My brother, myself, and my dad, we just played. And within 20 minutes, we had like 30 guys join us and none of us spoke English. We were just all united with the ball. We knew the rules. We knew how to play, how to divide teams. We didn't need to speak a language because soccer was our language. And that was a beautiful moment. We thought all these guys were tourists, from other countries because we thought Galveston was an incredible beach. Galveston is the worst beach in the US, likely. But we thought it was the best because that was the only beach I saw before that. California and Florida have ruined me since then. And I don't go to Galveston as much. But back then we went like 10 times a summer. And we were talking to them. They're like, no, we all live here. And we had no clue. And so that night we went to Google and just looked up demographics of Houston. Yeah, and Houston at that time was the second most diverse city. Now it is the most diverse city in the US. And so we had this idea, look, all these nations live here. The church that we're a part of, many churches that we know in our area have no clue that the nations live in our city because they live in inner city, urban areas where there's not a lot of churches, not a lot of church planning happen. What if we create a World Cup style event where these nations form their national teams, come and play against each other, a place where we can build unity among people who would never see one another, talk to one another, or kind of isolated, but also a place for a church to come and meet the people that God is bringing to our city. And so Cup of Nations was launched in 2010 during the World Cup in South Africa. And we've been doing it ever since here in Houston and around the US. But it's a beautiful tournament where we all look different, speak different languages, have different cultures, but we love the game together. So that's a little backstory of how I ended up in Houston. Currently, I serve as an executive director of Revival Sports. So a foundational moment for me was I couldn't afford to play soccer in the U.S. For a long time. My parents actually made me go to churches and fundraise for my soccer fees, which was a great experience. But at Cup of Nations, we met a nation, Myanmar, Burmese team, and they had tree bark paste, like this yellow paste on their face that serves as a sunscreen, which was crazy. Like we've never seen anything like that. And we played futsal 5v5, but they had 35 people on their team, and I was just like, how are they going to divide the time? Like it didn't matter to them. They just wanted all to be there. And so we decided to visit them just in Houston, close to downtown area, Southwest Houston. And when we got to their street, the poverty that we saw there was worse than Uzbekistan. I mean, I couldn't believe that I'm in the middle of Houston. We saw kids on the street playing soccer, kind of the way we did in Uzbekistan. In the Woodlands, nobody was playing soccer on the street. That was a cultural shock. No kid was ever outside doing anything. There, they were playing soccer. And so my brother and I knew that these kids probably had the same dream, and their dream was crushed when they moved here. And that, unlike, most of their parents don't have relationships with churches that can give and pay for their fees. And so my brother and I in high school decided to launch our own little soccer academy where we would coach kids for free and maybe give them opportunities to play. And so since then, that's what we've been doing.
And I just want to kind of take a step back because there's so much immigration conversation, refugee conversation going on right now, obviously in our country here in the U.S., where we all are. As you've gotten to know many, many refugees, recent immigrants to this country, is your story similar to most? Or is it
I would,
something that's very different? Or is it, what do you think?
yeah, I mean, if you're talking about refugees specifically, I think, a lot of times we confuse the terms and we kind of throw
Yeah.
every immigrant into the same category. Refugees are the most verified group of, immigrants into the country. A lot of them spend decades being verified by the US government before they move here. And I would say most of their stories is much worse than mine. What I've experienced compared to them, yes, I've lost my house, my country, my friends, lost everything. What they've experienced is war. We know kids, we've coached kids who've seen their whole tribes being executed. They've seen their grandparents being beheaded in front of them. We know kids who've ran away from war and had to spend years walking to a refugee camp, hiding from military who were ready to kill them. And so the stories of refugees are filled with suffering. It is so different than mine, I would say. I consider myself to be very blessed. And more than that, I'm blessed because I was adopted by so many amazing Christians. Many of them will never actually speak to an American. They live in isolation. They live on their own in areas where you won't find anybody who's an American. So their stories are hard.
What is that stat? Share that stat about how few refugees will actually eat in a home of an American.
Yeah, there's a stat. I'm not sure how correct it is, but it's done by an immigration agency, and they said 80% of refugees or immigrants will never share a meal with an American. Which, as someone who works with refugees and immigrants, I would say that is really, really true. I think if you would come to our soccer field and ask each kid if they've ever been in a house of an American, I would say 95% of them would say no. Uh, it is really heartbreaking because it's isolated communities, and we want them. I'm lucky that I speak English. I've been kind of assimilated into the Western world, into American culture. I had people helping me navigate the college process, people helping me navigate all the various things that are extremely confusing as you move from high school, to your kind of college career. These kids don't have anybody. And what broke my heart, I remember first time, a couple of things broke my heart. First soccer event we did in the neighborhood with the Burmese community was a boy, 14 years old, Johnny, from Burma, came up. He's covered in tats. I mean, he's tattooed out as a 14-year-old because they do their tribal tattoos. They use little needles themselves. And he just tells us, "Oh, are you going to be like all the other churches that come take pictures of us and leave? And that's it. We'd never see you." And that broke our heart. So the second thing we saw is when you ask these kids, what are your dreams? Who do you want to be when you grow up? Like if you ask a regular, like middle class kid, what do you want to be? It's like a doctor, an engineer, an astronaut, a president. These kids are like, I want to work in a chicken factory. I want to work at a tire shop. You know, like it's just heartbreaking that they are not dreaming. Um, and they move here, a land of opportunities, but right away they move into an area where it's like there are no opportunities available. And actually, there are drugs, violence, gangs that are constantly going at these kids.
Yeah. Roman, it's so powerful, the things that you're talking about. What stood out to me is your experience in Galveston. Because I grew up the other way. And the first time I ever went to Galveston, my reaction was, wow, this is the worst beach I've ever been to, honestly. And you said that you've been spoiled. But I love the concept and the idea of like, it's a beautiful place for people who've never experienced a beach, and I think perspective is huge for all of us to understand, for a lot of people. And just the thing that God's put in front of you of living in the woodlands, which all of us in Texas who know Houston, know the woodlands, know that is a far cry from the other neighborhoods that you're talking about. It couldn't be polar opposites of the extremes that you're able to experience. And I say able to, I think God's really put you in positions, obviously, to create, like you said, ways to break your heart, to drive you towards what he wants you to do. And I think we could probably gather a little bit the answer to my next question, but I'd love to just hear it in your words, man. What exactly is your why? What is your life purpose, and how are you living that out every day?
Yeah. I think, I don't want to be cheesy here, but I think,
oh, come on, be cheesy. Let's go.
The big why is I really want to live a life where I glorify God and enjoy him forever. And I think that looks in a few ways. I think some of the things that I'm really passionate about is I see fatherlessness all over the streets where we serve. Whether, for a lot of refugee dads, immigrant dads that move out here, they were engineers back home. They were generals. We know a guy who was a general, and his resume has U.S. generals as his references, U.S. marshals as his references. Like we called them, we checked on him. He couldn't get a job at a Target as a security guard. So these guys moved here highly qualified, but they lose their identity. And you see a lot of alcoholism. You see a lot of suicide that happens in the community. Or on the other hand, there'll be dads, but they're gone. They're working 3 jobs to support their family. And so we see coaches as father figures. That's a why. I want to see a generation, next generation, be healthy fathers who love their wives, who love their kids. I want to break the cycle of fatherlessness in Houston, and specifically where we serve in Southwest area. So we want to train our coaches to be dads on the field, father figures. We never replace them, but we can speak life into players. Second thing is I want to see disciples who make disciples, who love the Lord, who love sport, because I want to see the landscape of sports, specifically soccer, change in the US. And I think it starts at the heart level, where our hearts change, because so much of the soccer world is built on a business model that we don't really care about players. We care about how much they bring in. And so I think if we make more disciples, the world of sport will change, and that will bring glory to God. And the third thing is, I think I'm really passionate. Yesterday, I was even thinking about this. Philip, in the book of Acts, has an encounter with the Ethiopian eunuch, as the Ethiopian eunuch reads the Isaiah scroll. And when Philip shares with him the gospel, the first question that, the eunuch says, I want to be baptized. What hinders me from being baptized? And that question sticks with me. What hinders me? And, he was a eunuch. He wasn't accepted he was an Ethiopian into Judaism, even though he went to the temple, but likely he could never enter the temple. And so the question always, and Philip baptizes him. Like, I want to remove boundaries that hinder people from experiencing sport. That's another thing. From experiencing God, from experiencing the full things that the Lord wants us to experience. So I guess those three things are kind of my whys within it, to glorifying God and enjoying Him forever.
Yeah, that's massive. Well, you led with not being cheesy. I don't think there's anything cheesy about any of that, to be quite honest. And still made fun of your youth, but you're wise beyond your years, no doubt. So I
Blessed
appreciate
by great parents.
Yeah, well, the experiences again that God puts in our lives for whatever His purpose may be, and I love hearing how you're living those things out.
Yeah, definitely. I have, I know that about Roman as well, Paul. Yeah, sometimes he is cheesy, but that was not. And yes, you are wise beyond your years, and yes, you do have great parents, that have poured into you, and God has anointed you for sure, no question. And to that point, like you didn't really want to go into ministry, right? Like you wanted
Yeah,
to run far away, right? So
I
kind of,
did.
what was that? What do you want to do? And like, how did God say, sorry, bud, like you're meant for this stuff?
Yeah, I think my brother and I share a similar story in this, because we moved to the US. Because of my parents' ministry, we experienced hardship. So when we moved here, we're like, never doing ministry, never going to be poor. We're going to get rich, and maybe we'll support missionaries or ministries, but it's not for us. Another interesting thing, like I said, in Uzbekistan, if you become a Christian, you are signing your life away. But here we saw a new way of Christianity in the US, where, if I show up on Sundays for an hour and 15 minutes, and then Wednesday night youth service, like raise my hands, the other days I can just live for myself. Nobody has to know I'm a Christian. I don't need to share the gospel. This is great. Like the youth student I saw in my classes, in my youth at my church, I was like, man, Monday to Friday in school, they're not Christian at all. This is awesome. Like, why did my parents tell me this? So all of this contributed to us never wanting to be in ministry. We wanted to be in business. We graduated high school early, try to get our degrees early, really work hard at it. But what broke us was when we saw kids on the streets on Ranchester here in Houston. And we saw their story. They're refugees just like us, but it's way worse for them. And so my parents asked us a question: what are you going to do about this? If you see a need, what are you going to do about this? And you're talking to a 16 and a 14-year-old, we're still in high school. And so that my mom challenged us, hey, go and pray in this neighborhood, which was about an hour drive from us, once a week for 8 weeks. Go and pray and ask the Lord to show you what you're going to do about it. So we did that. We found on the last day, found little church called Chinese Bible Church right in that area, walking distance from the apartment complex. They had some property. So we asked them, hey, can we mow your grass and use this to reach kids with soccer here in this apartment complex? And they're like, yes, please mow our grass. We don't have money to mow it. This would help us a lot. And so first practice we did was 75 kids showed up, 75 boys from different nations. Second practice, 100. By the end of the month was 150. And so that's where we're like, okay, I think this is where the Lord is calling us. So that experience changed it all for us as we were trying to live out what we're going to do about it. God kind of opened the doors.
And that's amazing. And that really leads well into really where we want to go, with the conversation, just continue to lead in how that, I don't want to miss over the idea of, you kind of had your own path that you thought, based on your experiences. And then, a prayerful mother steps in and says, hey, why don't you just try this for a bit, and see how it goes, and seeing God lead you, and obviously led, by the directive of your mother. And I think a reminder to us as parents and leaders and coaches, father or mother figures as coaches, that it's important to speak into our youth, right, and lead them in the way that they should go. So that's awesome. Continue that path. Continue to tell us about Nations United, why the World Cup and Olympics provide such a great opportunity for the connection of the nations to share the gospel. Like, how do those things kind of come together?
Yeah. I think we have an incredible opportunity with the World Cup next year, with the Olympic Games in 2028, with the Women's World Cup coming to the US in 2031. I think sport is the best bridge between nations. It's this language that we're all speaking. And as I said earlier, uh, we are so divided in this country. Uh, you know, there's no unity between nations. There's no unity between people. Even within the church is so divided these days. And so this gives us an opportunity to unite with one another. And so Nations United specifically focuses on how do we use the momentum and the energy behind these major sporting events to connect communities that otherwise would never connect, that otherwise would never play together, would never build relationships with one another. And so World Cup is a great opportunity for that. So we have specifically developed 4 strategies that help churches, individuals, clubs, teams to go and build relationships with those who look very different from them. First is Cup of Nations, which I've mentioned earlier. It's a platform, a tournament platform, and you can do it futsal with 4 teams, 30 teams, 48 teams, outside, outdoor fields, whatever fits your context. Second is Festival of Nations, and this is a community event where people can come together, watch games together on the big screen, uh, you know, eat delicious food, international food, um, and just enjoy each other. Like when you watch games together, there's so many things you can talk about. If I meet somebody in the grocery store, it's awkward, odd. I can't talk to them. But when I'm watching games with people in the community, all of a sudden we're all united by one passion, and it's easy to start a relationship. Third one is called Kids Games, which is, think about it as sports camps, soccer camps for communities during the World Cup and Olympic Games that connect the Bible with sport, with various games, and allowing people to discover from that. And the last one is watch party in your house. I think, like I mentioned earlier, 80% of immigrants and refugees are not going to meet and have a deep relationship with an American. That, like, if my family didn't have strong relationships with Americans, we wouldn't have survived in this country. That's for sure. Like, we wouldn't be where we're at. So this is a great opportunity for people to open their homes and say, hey, come over for lunch, come over for dinner. Let's watch games together. Let's have conversations together and just build relationships with people who don't look like you, who don't talk like you, who might have a different worldview. So how do we really capitalize on this momentum to bring unity to our nation? Like, sport is a great unifying, thing in our lives. So that's what we want to focus on specifically with Nations United.
Yeah. You mentioned it earlier, Roman, and I'll just reiterate it again. We've all experienced this in one way, shape, or another. You said it earlier. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what language you speak, but you roll out a soccer ball and everything else goes away.
Yeah.
It is, and it's an amazing bridge builder for sure.
It is. It is.
Yeah, one of the things I've loved is, these are things like you said, they don't need to be massive things. I mean, yes, they can be, but the
Yeah.
reality is, almost the smaller it is, the more you can really connect with people. And so you talk about a watch party in a home, that's something that you can really connect at a deep level with different people. And, and it's not as threatening as, hey, let's go one on one with the dinner and, at our house with your, and that could be kind of weird, but you're like, hey, come over. I talk to people all the time about churches are like built in festival locations, like the big screen's already there.
Yeah.
sound systems that can pump a game. You have usually either big parking lot or big field as associated with the church at some level, especially in Texas. I mean, holy mackerel, you got fields like everywhere. And you can have carnival games and different things going on, a barbecue, different things. So it's just thinking outside the box a little bit. And the cool thing also, tell everyone just kind of about the materials and how you don't have to reinvent the wheel on any of this stuff. But what we've been kind of working on with Nations United.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you can find all of the guidebooks on how to run these strategies, online video courses. They're all completely for free. You can download them, use them the way you want to use them on nationsunited.net. And like what Phil said, all these strategies can be scalable, right? You can do it very small in your home or run it at your church, make it a huge festival, invite the community in. And so nationsunited.net, you can create an account. All the strategies are available for free for you to download. You can print them. And we're adding more and more strategies as we kind of get closer to the World Cup. And so if you get on the mailing list, you'll also get new strategies, new tools that are developed. And it's all things, like, yes, this is how you run a tournament, but this is also how you do disciple making through the tournament. This is how you have spiritual conversations at your tournament. And so it combines both the sport aspect and the faith aspect. And as I was talking, I think probably a lot of your listeners are coaches. I think one of the great things you can do during the World Cup time, and one of the easiest things you can do, it sounds really hard, but let me tell you, it's easy, is take your players and run a soccer clinic for a week in a low income community. You don't have to plan it far in advance. You really don't have to do any marketing. You just show up to a community, and on the second day, you will have 50 to 80 kids. Easy. Especially if it's free. And the amount of happiness that brings to the community is huge. Watch games with them in the evenings after the clinic. We're blessed that the World Cup is happening here and not in Qatar in 2026, because when I was in Qatar, I was like, I had to wake up at like 4 a.m. to watch a game. Now the games will fit our schedule. And so just the challenge is find a community in your city, low income community that loves sport, and just provide something with your athletes to them, because it will be life changing to them. It would have been life changing to me when I moved here. Definitely.
And I think that's something you can speak to that Paul and I can't, is right. Like, you came in, like what impact it had on a 12-year-old kid to have people invite you in. And the reality is, I mean, let's be honest, I hate to say it this way, but you look more like, I do, than a lot of the refugees coming into the country. So it might have been easier. And that's just reality.
Yeah,
and so
it is.
how can we, break that down? And also I want to say this, because I think it's really important. And I said this in a different context, but so much of and like you said, people bring together refugee, immigration, and like, to some people, every person here who's not American, pure-blooded citizen that has been here their whole life is in the same boat as any person coming across in a caravan that snuck in, right? Like, everyone's in the same thing. And so it's become very politicized, right? So you say, any this conversation, some people probably won't even listen to it because they're like, forget it. But what I'll say is, when you get to know people, it depoliticizes it. It becomes personal. So when it's politicized, it depersonalizes. When you depoliticize, you personalize. And so, or when you personalize, you depoliticize naturally. And I think that's something that I've seen in people who are very political, but then I'll see them, hanging out with people who definitely are not, they're definitely the people that would fit a category that they've been, yelling about, right? But they're really good friends. And you see that because it does. We're all people. People are people. And how can we connect with people is really what this is all about, is connecting with people and really being able to see how we can do that well. And it just gives some strategies, because a lot of people don't know what to do. My son came home the other day. You guys, I don't, at least know of Justin. And he's my 14-year-old son. And he just went to the park. He just, rides his bike all over the place, and he's riding his bike, went to the park with his ball and started shooting. And he's like, Dad, it was so cool today. I came home. He's like, so cool. There was like these 10 kids, and they were Indian kids. And, because we live in a community that has a bunch of people coming from all over the world. And it's, don't even need to go to a low income place in my neighborhood, because you go to the park
Yeah.
and there's kids from all over the place. And he's like, and they were a little younger, but they're like, playing, and he's like, I just asked him if I could play with them because they were playing small-sided games. And then they were saying, "Oh, you're so good," and you're this, so funny. But what was cool about it was he saw what we're talking about, just doing life in a normal way without a barrier, right? And so for us who are older, put yourself in the shoes of a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 14, who just go and play. And unfortunately, I think that's been taken out of our kids a lot nowadays because it's the protectionism. Kids aren't just going to the park and hanging out and playing as much. And so I just want to encourage people, let's revive that. Let's revive that, where we just say, to our kids, obviously be safe, but go and just play, because that's so much of what this is. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's what I'm seeing, and I've seen is so much of this is just, let's play together. When we play together, we will develop relationship just out of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So good, Paul.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, let's transition a little bit. I know we could talk through this. I mean, I think our listeners are probably tired of us hearing how awesome we think our guests are and how we could talk to them forever and have multiple episodes. But this is the case. I would encourage folks to look up the things that we've talked about, so far with the things that you've talked about, Roman, and we'll talk about it here at the end of it. But let's dive into you a little bit more, Roman, because that's what everybody's here to listen to, right? Is they want to know more about you. What was a defining moment in your soccer career, whether as a player or coach, or what was a defining moment that came through soccer for you?
I think there are two moments that were extremely defining for me. As a player, I was always more fascinated with coaches than I was with players. Like, I grew up watching Man U dominate under Ferguson, and I thought, wow, what a legend. Mourinho, huge for me as well. Like, I was just fascinated with coaches, and because I thought coaches make a huge impact. Even yesterday, as I was watching Inter a Barca game, like, just the coaching, I think one coach did a lot better. Inzaghi did really well. I think Hansi Flick maybe messed up with some substitution, but I'm always been fascinated by coaches. And I think defining moment for me was as a young player, I had two very different coaches. When I just moved to the US and we finally raised enough money to play, I had an Argentinian coach who coached me. He actually coaches my little brother now, who is 9 years old, which is crazy to think about. He spoke very little English at that time, but he loved us. Like, I felt like anytime I step on the field, like he's behind me. He's pushing me forward. He's encouraging our team. And there were 3 seasons where we've played, didn't lose a game. I mean, these were the best guys I've ever played with because of this coach. Second coach, this was when I moved to a higher level of youth soccer, was a guy who faked the British accent. He was a little younger, and we thought he was British this whole time until we met his dad, and his dad was like, "No, we're from New Jersey." He never had shared a meal with us. We traveled quite a lot as a team from, to Oklahoma, Louisiana, Alabama, pretty much every weekend. He would never share a meal with us. He would always be in his room, and he would cuss us out. Like, you make one mistake, you're out of it. You are benched for the next 3 games. And he would say some really mean things. And finally, one parent actually heard him cuss us out after one game. It was we were U17 at that time. And we as a whole team left our club, and we were the highest level of our club. U18s moving into next year, we all left because of him. And those 2 examples really motivated me of like, if I become a coach, I want to be like Julian, who empowers players, who sees potential in them, who parties with his players. Like Ancelotti, when they asked him, like, what's your strategy? He's like, I just party with my players. That's my strategy. That's what he said after winning Champions League last year. And that's, as I moved into coaching, that became a paradigm for me. Like, yes, winning is important, but what's more important is building confidence in people. And when I played with Julian, I was so confident of myself. When I played with the other coach, I don't want to say his name in case he's one of your listeners. I didn't have
Yeah.
any confidence. I felt like in a shell for those 3 years playing under him. And that spilled into all areas of my life. So that was a defining moment, just being coached by these two guys. Second is when my brother and I started our program, uh, we were young. We were so young. We didn't know anything. We didn't know how to coach. We had these two examples in our head and we wanted to be like Julian because my brother was also coached by Julian. Uh, and we didn't know like international conflicts that are happening in the area, how these nations interact with one another. And so when we had mostly Burmese kids, we didn't even know that they all come from different tribes that hate one another. And we never like they fought each other on the field all the time, but it was manageable. But we didn't even ask why, what's happening. But when we had kids from Latin America join, and you have to understand, I was 16, my brother 14 at that point, and we're coaching like 100 kids. With just volunteers who are my cousins, triplets, 15 years old. We were like, it was crazy. First practice, about 15, 20 players from Latin America show up. We were trying to mix with this Burmese, Nepalese, Bhutanese teams. And there's a huge fight that breaks up. And these guys are 18. Huge fight. Um, and out of nowhere, the Burmese players leave. And we're like, oh, thank God we broke this fight apart. We tried to look older than them. They thought we were in our 30s because we had beards by then already. And like, we just try to act old. I thank God. But then they came back with way more players, with way more people. And one of them had a gun. And so the Latin American players, they lined up on one side in the line. The Burmese, Nepalese, Bhutanese players lined up on the other side. And the guy pulled out a gun and said, until they leave my area, apologize to me. Like, we will fight and we can shoot. And like 5 of us just stood there in between them in a line. We had our first non-family volunteer. His name is Baba Tunde. He was a great guy from Nigeria. It was his first time volunteering with us. And he's like hiding behind the trees. And all we started to do is pray like as loud as we can, because we all thought this is it. This is the end of us. And out of nowhere, as we were praying, this player puts the gun down and says, I'm sorry. And he's like, this is crazy. I don't know what happened to us. And he messaged me even later that day. And he's like, I'm sorry, coach, for what I did. Never will happen. I will play with others. I will be united with others. And from that point on, there's no differences. It's something that the God has done supernaturally. That was the defining moment where we saw soccer and prayer really break barriers, because these guys, in our area, they have their ethnic gangs that fight each other in school and everything like that. But all of a sudden, all of that was broken apart. So that was a huge defining moment of like, okay, what we're doing can actually work and bring difference here. So let's keep going with this. Let's coach. Let's be 60-year-old coaches and do something about us.
I love that. I mean, there's so many, we obviously have spent a lot of time together. So, there's so many more stories. One thing I do I kind of piggyback, it's similar to ministry doesn't always look like you think it's going to look like. And so in sports, obviously that's the case too. But I just want you to, can you share real quick, how, when the first time you guys did Cup of Nations, first couple times in a big venue, and you had the opening ceremonies, and when you thought you were going to do the, big revival and you're going to have 1 million people come to the Lord through this big revival meeting, what happened in that?
Yeah. The first 3 years of Cup of Nations, maybe 2, we run an opening ceremony where we do a flag parade where different cultures, do their national dances and presentations and music, all this kind of stuff. And we were like, you know what? We're going to share the gospel from the stage and everybody's going to give their life to Jesus. So, we bring all these people. Like I said, we're running futsal. At that time, it was done we were doing it at Houston Baptist University, or Houston Christian University. By the way, Um, HBU, Division One men's soccer, played at Cup of Nations a couple of times, and they didn't make it out of the bracket, lost all games to a bunch of 30, 40-year-old men from the Middle East. It was incredible to watch, just the level of soccer. So we're like, all right, we found a great gospel preacher. He's going to come, he's going to kill it. And people got up and left during the gospel preaching. So imagine like 70% of people just standing up from the gym, like the bleachers, and just walking out. And it just creates the worst atmosphere ever. Second year, we're like, okay, it didn't work. The guy was probably a little older. We're learning something new here, church growth strategy, social media. You need a young, handsome, energetic guy who's wearing really stylish clothes. So if you can find that guy, for sure, we're going to win the audience. And it was even worse. I mean, people just left, like hundreds of people walking out. So that was a defining moment of ministry for us, because what we realized is when you're working with internationals who come from different faith backgrounds, worldviews, evangelism has to be relational. It has to be in conversation. It has to be built on friendships. You can't expect people to be like, oh, great story here. I'm ready to pray, ready to walk the aisle. So since then, we train people. They can be just disciple makers at the tournament. They can have simple, then serious, then spiritual, then scriptural conversations with people, and we don't have to do it from the stage. But that was crazy, man. When you see all these people leave, you're just it's not working out.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you always hear about the Billy Grahams and the Harvest Crusades and the stadiums filled with people and millions of people. I could pick, since I've been to a Cup of Nations, I could picture what that looked like. And yeah, that's crazy. It's a lot. And I know a lot of people here in the local community in Sacramento, where I'm at, do a lot of work with the Afghan communities, and it's a lot of hanging out and having tea, and definitely no open air stuff going on, because it wouldn't go over too well. So
Now,
yeah, I think that's so important though with anything you do. Really, it's know your audience, know what they
yeah,
believe, know the worldview. Know if you're coaching, it's so important, right? To know who you're coaching and how they're connected, what they look like, what their family background is, all of that. So before we get into the last couple questions, can you just share? I know you and I do a lot of work with the global sport movement, the North American sport movement. Can you just share how people can learn more about that, and a little bit about what it is generally?
yeah. Global sport movement is a volunteer based movement. So there's not a single employee. There's no office, no headquarters, but it's a movement of organizations, churches, athletes, coaches, clubs, and teams that sees the power of sport, and that the power of sport and the gospel can transform the world. And so our desire is to see disciple making teams who are using sport, play, fitness, action sports, all abilities, video games in every city, community of the world. And so together we work to collaborate, to build resources to equip people, to build strategies that people can use locally, models of ministry. And so it's been a fascinating journey, because it's people from all over the world working together. You're coming, to work together, and it's hundreds of people from like 80 to 100 nations, but with the goal of seeing disciple making teams in every city and community of the world, in every neighborhood of the world. And North America's sport movement is a subset, it's a regional expression of the global sport movement. So we specifically here focus on North America. We have organizations, churches that are partnering together. We would love to see in every city with the population of over 100,000 people that there'll be a Christian coach, Christian athlete, a Christian club, a ministry that is reaching people through sport and bringing the gospel to communities. That's kind of the big overview of global sport movement and North American sport movement.
So where can people learn about it?
Yeah, you can go to readysetgo.world to learn more about the global sport movement, readysetgo.world, or NorthAmericanSportMovement.com to learn more about what is happening in North America. We're actually having our annual conference October 6th through 8th, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 8th through 10th. You can find it on NorthAmericanSportMovement.com, where we are all coming together, different groups of people, but united with the passion to make disciples in the world of sport and play. And so it'll be in Carlsbad, very beautiful location. Would love to see you guys out there. so we can learn from one another and be equipped and encouraged together.
Yeah, Carlsbad has beaches that are better than Galveston.
I
So
was
Yeah,
that
hoping, I
is,
was
man.
hoping for Galveston, but
eh,
all right, we'll do
yeah.
Carlsbad.
I mean, it was the second choice. We didn't have a location in Galveston, so we went with
Yeah,
Carlsbad.
sadly.
So yeah. All right. So let's get into the last couple questions. Um, uh, the first is, you've listened to the show, you know this. What is something you have learned directly from the game of soccer that you have used in your marriage and parenting?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. I think one thing that as I've watched the best players and as I played is you have to have short memory in parenting and marriage. I just became a dad, so my daughter is 16 months
So
old,
you're
so
still an
there's not a
expert.
lot.
You're
So
still an
I'm
expert.
no expert
Yeah.
in parenting, but in
Yeah.
marriage, I think like greatest soccer example is Saka against Real Madrid, second leg of the semifinal. They're up 3-0, but Real Madrid has this like, we're going to come back momentum behind them. Saka has an opportunity to convert a penalty, like first 20 minutes of the game. He does a terrible job. I mean, it's a terrible penalty. And you would think that with Saka's history of penalties, specifically what happened with him after England, that will kill the game for him. He's done. Like, might as well sub him out because mentally he's probably not there. What happens? He scores the first goal. I mean, he's doing incredible work. He's not living in that moment. He's not like sitting there, oh, how dare I? And I think in marriage, what I'm learning is short memory. We got to bounce back from mistakes quickly, apologize quickly, ask for forgiveness quickly, and forgive quickly. You don't need to dwell in the past, especially if, I think from the very beginning in our marriage, our pastor said, good marriage is not the goal. Great marriage is the goal. Good marriage is okay. It's easy. It's not hard. And from the very beginning, we were like, we can't dwell on our mistakes. Like once we say you're forgiven, you're forgiven. We've been doing these things where we have like these, they're not really check-ins, but they are kind of check-ins when we share the ways we've hurt one another this past week. And once those things are shared, you can't bring them up again. Like you move on and you shouldn't dwell on them. So that's thing has been a big lesson for me. I think another thing, Julian, my coach, so I played center defensive mid for him. And he always, I love to run and I just like to chase. And I was a pretty aggressive player. So every time, the ball is coming on the right, like I'm trying to go to the ball. I'm trying to go. It's not my position. It's not where I'm supposed to play. And he would always scream, know your position, know your position, know your role. He would say that nonstop. And so I think that's the same thing I'm trying to learn in marriage and in parenting. What is my role right now? Where am I supposed to be investing my time in my marriage? What is my role as a provider, as a defender? What is my role as a father while my daughter is 16 months old? Making sure that I stay in that lane and not try to do everything, because if I do everything, then I'm not covering the most important things. I'm not covering the things that I'm supposed to be doing. So that always thinks, she's like, stay in your position. What are you doing? You're crazy. Stay in your position. And I was like, I'm just loving this. I want to be, and I think last thing is, in this world, I think we don't celebrate small wins. Like your small win doesn't matter. Like what matters is you winning a championship, you winning a big tournament. One game doesn't matter. One great goal doesn't matter. One great pass doesn't matter. Uh, and I think celebrating small wins is huge in life because we live in a social media age where everybody posts their most grand moments. And you feel like you can only celebrate when you go on vacation to a 5-star resort in like Italy. That's worth celebrating. But if you go to Galveston and spend a day with your family, that's nothing. And so we live in a world of comparison constantly. And so I'm learning how to celebrate little things with my baby, with my child, as she, taking first steps, not comparing her to a kid ahead of her. When she's saying her first words, how do I celebrate this and make this a victory for my team, my family, that God has given me? I think those are some of the things that I learned. And the last thing, I think this goes to kind of what I mentioned earlier. I always like to train. That's like the reason I made good teams wasn't because I was talented, but because I would message each coach in my club and say, hey, my practice at this time, can I come and, coach with, train with your team an hour before or an hour later? And most of the time they said yes. And I think, training is what sets us for good performance. What we do when nobody sees it is what sets us for good performance. And my dad always said, and my sister, who was a gymnast, she would always say, practice makes perfect. I think perfect practice makes things perfect. If you practice things badly, it'll be bad. Uh, Perfect practice makes things perfect. But I think that applies to my life as somebody leading ministry. Like, I spend time when nobody sees me, praying, being in the Word of God, training my mind, training my character, training my heart. So when it is time for me to perform, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I love that. It's a good thing you like to run and chase because you have a 16-month-old. That's what you're going to be doing for a while.
I know.
And I can
I
tell
know.
you is Phil's way more experienced in this than I am. Your oldest just turned 16 months. My oldest just turned 16 years.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm like 90 years old, Roman. Okay. And yeah, you're just chasing. You're just chasing. It's fun. So
Chasing.
good thing you have that work ethic because
Yeah.
raising children is easy. No problem. But no,
Super
those are
easy.
wise. And those,
Super easy.
Phil, there's some new nuggets in there that Roman shared
I
with us
know.
that we haven't
That
heard
was good.
before.
That was good. I like
It's
it.
awesome.
And it was,
Um,
solid. Know your role. I like it. That might be
yeah.
the title of the episode. I don't know.
Know
We'll
your
see.
role. Yeah. Last in the final series of questions here, Roman, what have you read, watched, or listened to that has informed your thinking on how soccer explains life and leadership?
Yeah. I think as I became a dad, I'm not watching a lot of things. All I have time is to watch soccer and actual soccer, and that's it. And I think, you guys have a lot of stuff on Ted Lasso already. So it's like, I can't really mention Ted Lasso because that's what a lot of people mention. Um, but
It's
I
a good
think
time to mention though, because I think there's another season coming out pretty
I,
soon.
I,
So
I
And
quit
you
watching it
mentioned it
halfway through the
anyway.
second
You
Yeah,
mentioned
season.
it by not mentioning it. You mentioned it. So
I
yeah,
know.
you
that
can't
was,
not mention it and say the words. So
yeah,
anyway,
it's true.
carry on,
It's true.
Roman.
I'm so sad about that. No, I think lately what really has motivated me a lot is the series on Amazon. It's called All or Nothing. I don't know if you guys have seen those,
Mm-hmm.
where they follow a team together um, through through their season. So again, coaching is my uh, what I love watching. And so the Man City specifically, I really love watching Guardiola's uh, the way he coached his team. There was a part of the season there where they really dropped their performance. And what Guardiola said there to them is he challenged them and also confirmed their identity at the same time. He basically was like, I know who you guys are. I know how you guys can play. And what is happening right now is not you. And it's not what you're about. And it's not how we play. So we got to fix that right now. So let's go deep into who we are. And I thought that was beautiful. Like, it was a kind of like speaking highly of his players, but also, you know, really like challenging them. Hey, this is not our level. I know who you are. It wasn't kind of like, you guys suck. I can't believe I'm coaching this team. I can't believe you guys are just the worst players. So that's really encouraging, great thing for me. Um, that I've kind of watched over the last few years. I think they have a few other episodes. They had the Brazilian national team, Juventus, a few that Arsenal that are great. Not Manchester United, Phil, unfortunately, even though this season would have been great to watch. I would have loved to be behind the scenes of Man U season this year.
It would have been fascinating for several of the last few years just because of it's always fun to watch a train wreck. Yeah, no, thank you, man. I am so grateful for you, for our friendship, for, like Paul mentioned earlier, the wisdom that you do bring to the table, from a lot of life experience, but also just, a life that has been dedicated to serving the Lord. And you see that in a lot of ways. And so proud to call you friend, proud to call you brother, and thank
Dude,
you
thank
for
you
being a
guys.
part of the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been fun.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, hey, I hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did, and I hope you do take, you check out all the resources we talked about on the show. There was a lot. We threw a lot at you today, and so hopefully you go check them out. If you're interested in any of the stuff, please do reach out. You can reach out to Roman. You can reach out to me about it as well. Something I've been impacted a lot over the last few years through the movement and different people that I've been able to connect with. But as always, we hope that you're taking what you're learning from this show and you're using it to help you to be a better coach, a better parent, a better spouse, a better player, better leader, better in everything that you do. And you continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.